Obviously, the most straightforward way to pass through Castle Naerytar is to locate the portal beneath the castle and use the secret word to activate it. The fastest way to do that would be either to spy on Razmir or Drellin as they oversee the treasure transportation, or to search Razmir's chambers. Remember my suggestion to let the spirits in the observatory help the characters with that. But with that being said, it is really up to the DM where to nudge your players towards. There's a lot going on, and personally I would let the players taste a little bit of everything. Considering the players have managed to fool everybody into thinking they are the freshman cultists, this is actually a nice place to split the party and have them engage in various exploration activities. If they stumble upon something deadly like giant spiders or hostile specters and they clearly can't handle it, they can always shut the door, cry for help, and run away. And so, let's say the players are about to have a taste of being a freshman and do the dirty work for high-ranked cultists, whilst eavesdropping and sniffing around. You want to remember that these are dragon claws and dragon wings, folks that have been around for quite some time compared to simple raiders. Think about what it's like to serve the cult for several years. Already they probably wouldn't have silly stormtrooper conversations. You most likely have to be pretty crazy and evil to have a desire to bring Tiamat into Faerun. These guys are murderers, fanatics, intelligent enough to serve their purpose in this grand scheme. Try to think about what they're doing all day long. Praying, meditating, practicing with spells and weapons. How willing are they to share any information with the new recruits? It is really up to you, as overall, it doesn't really matter for the story of this chapter, but a well thought out routine and lifestyle of these guys would serve a nice purpose to the atmosphere flavor-wise. Personally, I would present these people as alien in terms of humanity as possible. They will never share a wholehearted laugh, they lack empathy. If they had any regrets about their life choices, they were probably brainwashed quite a lot. Even now, perhaps they spend hours reading some old religious tomes in Draconic, repeating monotonous chanting once in a while. You can have your players witness something of that sort. Also, this is perhaps the place where I would have the name of Tiamat ring clearly for the first time in the adventure. Surprisingly, it's not obvious for some DMs to address the monster manual for something other than the stat block. Don't forget that this is arguably the most handy sourcebook in 5th edition. You can create entire adventures revolving around some of the monster descriptions. They will provide you with solid ideas of a particular monster, in our case, bullywugs and lizardfolk, their society, customs, and behavior. So I encourage you to read those respective paragraphs and shape your roleplay around it. How bullywugs think of themselves as aristocrats, how lizardfolk respect and fear magic in a religious awe. Having all that figured out, what you want to do is establish some daily routines of these groups inside Castle Naerytar. How would a normal day in the lizardfolk camp look like if a character would like to take a walk in there? Try to come up with tiny events that the PCs might witness, but always think about the intentions behind showing something. For example, if you want to foreshadow a massive conflict and nudge your players towards setting a riot, then emphasize on how the lizardfolk are being brutally bullied by bullywugs. I don't remember if it was actually in the book, but I've had the lizardfolk use drums to signal something like a returning hunting party or patrol change. It served as a little extra flavor as well as a tool for some sort of creative decision when planning the fight. Drellin Borngray. This is a curious person in charge of this entire base of operations. When I ran the game, I found this character fairly boring and he didn't play much of a role, but it doesn't have to be the case if you want to play with him. So let's have a closer look. A rather random fact is thrown at us by the authors, that this elf is a member of lutes&dice. It turns out there's a typo. This organization is first mentioned in 2nd edition Cloak and Dagger sourcebook, and then revisited in 3.5 edition book Champions of Ruin. Borngray seems to be a loyal member of both the cult and his elven organization, so let's address this group to gain a deeper understanding of his ideals and perception of the world. The lutes&dice is a group of fanatical elf supremacists who have vowed to remove the human scourge from the face of Faerun. It views humanity as a blight upon the land, little better than an infestation of vermin in dire need of genocidal house cleaning. Its members operate throughout Faerun, particularly in ancient elf homelands, as well as in those forests largely abandoned during a historical event called Elven Retreat, such as Ardeep, the High Forest, Neverwinter Woods, and so on. Wherever human civilization threatens elf interests, the lutes&dice works to slow or halt human encroachment by any means necessary. Although they consider themselves themselves to be true to the most traditional and honored Elven ideals, most elves are embarrassed by the Eldrath Veluthra and would prefer to see the organization disappear. And it would have long ago if it did not enjoy secret support at the very highest levels of elf society. The Eldrath Veluthra is reasonably well funded considering its secretive and destructive ways, and there is no shortage of elves who publicly espouse cooperation between the races while privately funneling money, goods, magic and weapons to the local cell of the Eldrath Veluthra. One of the regions of their influence includes the Mischief Forest, which the party is very likely to visit during the rise of Tiamat. Eldrath Veluthra has set up a secret base there from which to raid, presumably upon any human settlements near the forest border. What I'm saying is, if your Borngray is going to escape, that's where he can potentially reappear to have revenge. Now, D&D 3rd edition in Forgotten Realms took place a little more than 100 years ago, but I keep seeing how the designers themselves sometimes keep entire paragraphs in 5th edition from even 2nd edition books that date back to 30 years ago, so I wouldn't hesitate to use something like that if I wanted to. Regarding this particular episode, don't forget to show his absolute contempt towards any human character, and if your party spends quite some time in the castle, perhaps Borngray would consider approaching an elf PC to introduce them to the philosophy of Eldrath Veluthra, and possibly try to recruit them. As I always advise, when role-playing a prominent character, try to project their personality into their mannerism, catchy phrases, intonations, a slight change in accent, and so on. Just 2 minutes of practice when preparing would suffice. And the same goes to Asbara Joss and Razmir. Even though they're likely to appear very episodically in this chapter, perhaps only in a distance while taking care of some business right before setting off for Parnast. Speaking of these guys, one of the possible ways to utilize them is as a hint towards the dungeon. You can show how Razmir poses herself as a boss, Asbara being something of her advisor. Drellin might give her an excursion of some sort, discuss a little bit of business, and then the 3 of them would descend into the dungeon, Borngray being the only one to return. Finally, let's discuss a possible rise of lizard folk and a massive battle. First of all, be attentive to your players and give them a chance to avoid the conflict entirely if that's what they're trying to do. If the riot does occur, it might be your first massive combat in D&D. I could perhaps do an entire separate video on this, but I'll try to keep it reasonably short. I've tried many ways to run massive combat: homebrew rules, unearthed arcana rules, DM's Guild homebrew supplements, all kinds of stuff. My opinion is D&D is not about that. It is not designed for clashing armies or even squads. For me, it is best played in a cinematic fashion with changing shots, combat rounds ending with cliffhangers, background extras, sacrificing a tiny bit of rules in favor of a satisfying narrative experience. Basically, if there's more than 1 or 2 NPCs involved in a massive conflict, as soon as initiative is rolled, I still count only the player characters and their direct enemies. Everything else is a background blur that slightly changes every round or so. People die, stuff gets destroyed. I keep track of the general situation in an abstract fashion. Usually there's something at stake that would affect the battle. Perhaps time is against the PCs. Every round that the enemy leader is alive, more and more of their allies die every next round. I just write down rough numbers on a sheet of paper and translate that into a somewhat dramatic narrative. Maybe you and your players are very much into simulating everything and rolling tons of dice. Then you should do your thing. But as a rule, I have found that most people, especially casuals, enjoy a very dynamic fashion of combat with minimum amount of rules and math involved. My biggest point is, I don't think Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition handles precise massive combat very well as, for instance, naval combat. This is the case when rules should indeed be just guidelines for the story and nothing more. And once again, this is just my opinion, and it works best for me by far. And that's it for Castle Naerytar, at last. It only took 3 episodes to deal with. I promise it's the last one, and I'll see you all as we move east to the Hunting Lodge, Parnast, and the Skyreach Castle. If you enjoy my videos, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell button so you won't miss the new uploads. You can also support the channel by following lutes&dice on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. If you have extra coin to support lutes&dice, you can do so on Patreon and receive cool rewards like MP3s of my music and PDFs with homebrew magic items, NPCs and adventures. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.